Hey everyone, it is time to review WitchSpring R, a turn-based RPG developed by Qworks. As far as I know, they are famous for these WitchSpring games, originally released for mobile gaming, and WitchSpring R is no exception, being a remake of their first game. Aside from this, I knew about some of their previous works, but they never really attracted my attention. Anyways, let's dive into the story, gameplay, graphics, and music. This tale begins explaining that there were other creatures with godly powers, being able to resurrect humans and control the weather. Surprised by these powers, human beings worship these gods, asking for their miracles. However, once humanity found out they were able to get those powers, they slaughtered these gods. As time passed, humans and gods had children. They were known as witches, but they were persecuted and haunted. Some of them were thrown away in the middle of the forest. And that is pretty much how we follow Pieberry, a young girl that lives in the Black Witch's Forest, a place separated from the human territory. What's ironic is that the soldiers start to appear more frequently, but Pieberry didn't mind this, as she also knew they had pies, one of her favorite foods. Strawberries is the other one. At first, it may be a trivial story, with no real development, but I will say, do not let its charming nature fool you. WitchSpring R dives into other topics as losing loved ones, one-sided story written by the winners, and this young girl who's going to be helped by plenty of people, so she can understand why she has to live this kind of life, or in general, why witches have to live like that. Of course, this is not a story that takes things that serious. It has its fair share of dumb moments, which I definitely loved. I mean, Pieberry is made different. While trying to venture into the human world, a golem that protects the portal catches her and throws her into the witch's forest. But the way this was animated was hilarious, at least for me. And I believe it works nicely as Pieberry has this happy-go-lucky attitude, so there is a nice mix in this tale. Considering all of these details, I will give it an 8. It was a good story, perhaps not for everyone, but if you're looking for something between easygoing and entertaining, it will work nicely for you. On this front, something I like so much is that most interactions have voice acting, which works quite well. Karen Takahashi did a really good job. Let's divide the gameplay into different topics. As the general flow, it's level of customization and boss battles. Here we have a linear journey at first, because we will have to explore area A, B, C and so on. Until some late chapters we will have the means to dive into other places. What is cool is that the game doesn't really tell you anything about it, but later you have me diving deeper and deeper. The thing here is that there are enemies that have some stats above you, so you will find block paths every now and then. And within these dungeons, there are extra rooms. Inside you will find special items, more pets to assist you in battles, and some nasty enemies. For the most part they are easy to traverse, as there are no random encounters. Every time you enter into some of these circles, the game asks you if you want to initiate combat or retreat. And in case you fail, you can retry and retry as many times as you want, or return to your last autosave. What is nice about this system is that I ended up underestimating some enemies, but I had nothing to lose. Inside these battles, the only character you have to worry about is Pieberry. Your allies appear, but they never fall in battle. With this said, it is all about finding the right balance between defending, prioritizing enemies, and using special moves as effectively as possible. Sometimes easier said than done, and despite being simple, it is quite entertaining, because as you advance the game will throw different kinds of challenges. What took me by surprise? Here you do not increase stats as in your traditional RPG. There are plenty of little mechanics for that, as acquiring blessings, finding items, beating some bosses for special drops, exercising, evolving your weapons, and beating many enemies. On this front, everything is going to depend from the kind of path you wanna take, because as you advance you can choose between physical or magic. Unfortunately, your weapon has but one path of evolution, and I don't recommend you to cross-train, so choose one or the other and stick with that choice. And well, witches have had this idea of being magical and all that stuff, so I made her into a physical powerhouse. The real difference between one and another is that for magics you need to make some items, add special powers and then have them in battle. While physical is all about finding powerful weapons and understanding the area of effect while attacking. Of course, as you advance, you can find other weapons. Some specialize in physical, as swords, and others specialize in magics. Some can be evolved and others not. Keep this topic in mind, cause we need to check it once we talk about bosses. For the other methods to increase stats, as you do other activities you will increase this gauge that tells you how many exercises you will be able to do. Some of them focus in physical activities, and others in, let's say, mental activities. Needless to say that you have to focus for the most part in one, as they give you other skills as you unlock levels. As for the other methods to increase stats, they could be summarized as exploring and beating enemies, because you can synthesize or straight up use drops to increase your stats. Here what's important is to fight enemies every now and then, so you can increase the combat proficiency, which increases both magical and physical attributes. With all of that understood, the next big steps are the bosses. WitchSpring R has many bosses all over the place. If you focus in story events, there's going to be lots and lots of events that you are going to miss. As you dive deeper into dungeons, you will see some of those imposing figures that most likely will beat the heck out of you the first time you see them. And yeah, some of them are quite challenging, as they deal lots of damage in 1 or 2 turns, oftentimes having special moves every now and then. What's important is that some of these bosses drop special weapons, for example this one. Once going through its huge HP pool, you will be asked if you wanna take the sword out of it, and yeah, it is too hot, you cannot do it, needing to beat another ice boss previously. That is how you can get an ice heart, if I remember well. So you can take the far sword, and like this, some other bosses will work as gatekeepers or event keepers, if that makes sense, asking you to do other many activities out there. Some feel like you're running in circles, as they aren't intuitive, and some others are rather simple, asking you to just step in and beat the heck out of each other. But I gotta praise this part of the game, as I had a lot of fun here. I knew that if I had problems with a particular challenge, I had to retreat, increase some stats and then come back. So just keep in mind that the last section of the main game will tell you that you won't be able to do other activities until you finish the whole sequence. That is the only boss fight that made feel like they are cheating, as they can one-hit KO Pieberry. Aside from that, the whole journey is perfectly balanced. Putting everything on the table, the only thing I didn't like about its gameplay is that there was a puzzle in the mines that either I didn't understand or it was pure RNG. If you failed, you had to try again and again, and I never got what I had to do, or if there was a queue to jump into a specific place. Aside from that and other kind of simple activities, I gotta say that I like this gameplay a lot. It wasn't your usual journey, and it had a creative idea to balance everything out, so a 9 is good enough. I believe that the number of things to do was good, and if you fell in love with it, you will be able to dive even more, as there are other bosses and regions waiting to be explored. In the graphics section, I checked glitches, aesthetics and other visual things. This is the PS5 version of the game, and the only weird thing is that for some reason the little board companion appeared twice. Yep, I had to experiment, so I changed boards, and then it kinda glitched out, appearing under Pieberry. Fortunately, all I had to do was go back to her house and everything fixed itself. Aside from that, I didn't experience something negative or in detriment of the game. What has to be pointed out is that, most likely, WitchSpring R was made on a budget. You will see repainted enemies here and there, as well as some other basic executions. But to be honest, they didn't bother me that much as in other games. On the contrary, sure, while simple, I like the general aesthetic of multiple dungeons, mountains, meadows and caves. Leaving the repetitive nature of some enemies aside, there are some interesting ideas, perhaps a bit too round in some cases, but they are charming and fitting for the kind of world presented, so I didn't really mind it. A detail that I enjoy so much is that the physical route gives Pieberry multiple hit combos, and I like to watch those swings against enemies. With this idea, it is fair to mention that some animations aren't the best, as when she uses her bow, but that is going to be key from my side. In general, there are interesting effects while in combat. And in the story, most interactions happen as a visual novel, assisted by 3D models, sometimes showing character animations as the one where Pieberry is thrown away, and sometimes showing these portraits. So despite being a budget edition, it has delivered a much more interesting execution in comparison to many other games. Yeah, there are areas that are a bit barren, considering that you won't see that many details. However, despite that, it was a good experience. I wanna give it an 8. And to finish the review, its soundtrack. This is the part that needed some extra love. WitchSpring R has somewhere around 38 tracks, going for around 1 hour. I will say that most compositions are quite charming and catching, having a melodious vibe, kinda reminiscent to something like exploring or while walking in a meadow. In paper, it sounds interesting, but once you listen to its whole composition, it is easy to notice that they are really short. In general, going for around 1 minute. What ends up happening is that some cinematics start to feel repetitive or that they do not deliver as nicely as they could have. That is my whole deal about this execution, because once again, I believe it has a charming soundtrack with interesting tunes, but the length of the compositions end up killing part of the experience, and this is easy to notice as they do not have the best of transitions, having to abruptly cut the tune to then repeat it once again. Something similar could be said about the combat tracks, having but few ones for the whole game, and with that idea we could summarize its whole soundtrack. Kinda short and repetitive, with bad transitions to loop the same tune. I would give it a 7.5. It isn't bad, but considering previous ideas, it left some things to be desired. WitchSpring R final score is an 8.1. In the end, I believe it was a good experience, particularly its gameplay, as it isn't your usual RPG, because here you have to do plenty of other activities to upgrade weapons, synthesize or stuff like that, as well as the number of random events left and right. So despite being a short game, there are plenty of activities to do. However, what could have improved is the soundtrack. Oftentimes you hear me say that they need to have slightly longer compositions. Well, this one definitely needed longer compositions. Aside from that, I still consider it was worth playing it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.